10 days after Spain lifted the World Cup trophy at MetLife Stadium, Gianni Infantino made an announcement that sent shockwaves through world football. FIFA, the organization that governs the sport for 211 nations, is selling a stake in the World Cup. Not a small stake, not a temporary arrangement. A permanent 20% ownership interest in a new subsidiary that would control the commercial future of the most watched sporting event on Earth. The price tag, $20 billion. The buyer, Thrive Eternal, a permanent holding company led by Josh Kushner, the brother of Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of Donald Trump. The same Donald Trump who, 10 days earlier, had stood alongside Infantino at the World Cup final, holding the trophy. UEFA's response was immediate, unanimous, and unprecedented. All 55 UEFA member associations voted in an emergency meeting to boycott every FIFA competition on Earth. The World Cup, the Women's World Cup, the Under-20 Women's World Cup, the Under-17 Men's World Cup, every tournament until this plan is abandoned in its entirety. England, Germany, France. Spain, the reigning world champions, would not play in the 2030 World Cup unless Infantino backs down. This is the biggest crisis in world football since the European Super League collapsed in 2021. And it is happening right now. This is the story of what FIFA is actually proposing, why UEFA has drawn a line in the sand, and what it means for the future of the game. Let's start with exactly what FIFA announced. On Tuesday, the 29th of July, 2026, FIFA published details of what it is calling the FIFA Forward Enterprise, the FFE, a new subsidiary that would take control of all of FIFA's commercial operations, broadcast rights, sponsorship deals, ticketing, licensing, and the operational delivery of FIFA tournaments, including the World Cup. FIFA is seeking to raise up to $4.2 billion in capital, based on an initial equity valuation of $20 billion, by selling a minority stake up to 20% to outside investors. The lead investor approach has come from Thrive Eternal, Josh Kushner's firm, with JP Morgan involved in structuring the deal. Crucially, unlike private equity investors who typically seek returns over 5 to 10 years and then exit, Thrive Eternal is a permanent holding company, meaning this would be a permanent disposal of a stake in the World Cup, not a temporary arrangement. To sweeten the deal for FIFA's 211 member associations, Infantino proposed paying each one $80 million between now and 2037. $20 million immediately upon approval, with 3 further payments to follow. The deadline for member associations to decide, the 19th of September 2026. And here is the threat that accompanied the offer. In a letter to member associations, Infantino said, and this is a direct quote, "Should neither condition be satisfied, FIFA will continue as planned with the Forward Program 4.0, meaning approximately $10 million per member association for the next cycle. In other words, vote yes and get $80 million. Vote no and get $10 million. That is not a consultation. That is an ultimatum. UEFA called it exactly that, and then did something nobody expected it to do this quickly. Within 48 hours of Infantino's announcement, UEFA convened an emergency virtual meeting of all 55 member associations. Sources told ESPN that over 50 of the 55 associations took the floor, every single one expressing the same thing: unanimous fury. The vote was unanimous. UEFA and its national associations would boycott all FIFA competitions for as long as these proposals remain alive, unless the proposal has been abandoned in its entirety and binding assurances have been given that FIFA will never again open its governance or competitions to private ownership. UEFA's statement did not leave room for negotiation. The World Cup cannot be treated as an investment product. It is one of football's greatest sporting legacies. UEFA and its 55 member associations stand as one. CONCACAF, the North American Confederation, also raised concerns, making 3 of FIFA's 6 continental confederations publicly opposed within 48 hours. And then something extraordinary happened. Britain's new Prime Minister issued a statement. Expressing concern about the plan, the leader of a G7 nation weighing in on a football governance dispute. Now let's talk about why this plan matters so much, and why UEFA's reaction has been so fierce. Because on the surface, you might ask, what's the problem? FIFA already generates $13 to $15 billion per World Cup, already has sponsors, broadcasters, ticket resellers taking their cut. What difference does another investor make? The answer lies in what private ownership actually changes. The FFE would not just be a passive investor, it would have influence over the commercial and operational delivery of FIFA tournaments, meaning the people who invested $20 billion would have a legitimate interest in maximizing returns from those tournaments. And maximizing returns in sport almost always means one thing: more. More matches, more teams, more tournaments, more revenue streams. CNN reported that under this proposal, there would be an even greater incentive to expand the tournament and the Club World Cup to include more teams. Infantino has already suggested expanding the 2030 World Cup to 64 teams. Private investors would push even harder. Would investors pressure FIFA to hold the World Cup every 2 years instead of every 4? FIFA abandoned exactly that proposal in 2021 because of the threat of a UEFA boycott. Private equity investors seeking returns would have every incentive to revive it. And then there is the question of who exactly is buying. Josh Kushner, the brother of Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. In a deal announced 10 days after Trump stood alongside Infantino at the World Cup final. In a deal where FIFA's president is expected, according to The Times, to become commissioner of the new entity, potentially after securing a further term as FIFA president next year. UEFA and critics have not been subtle about what they see here. In their statement they said, directly, FIFA cannot continue to use our sport to enrich themselves and their friends. Professor Simon Chadwick, the same sports academic who raised concerns about political interference in refereeing decisions at the 2026 World Cup, noted that the political and personal ties between Trump and Infantino only deepened during the tournament, and that those ties are now fueling legitimate concern about whose interests FIFA is actually serving. And here is the number that tells you how serious UEFA is. At the 2026 World Cup, UEFA members made up 6 of the 8 quarter-finalists, 3 of the 4 semi-finalists, and the eventual champions, Spain. A World Cup without UEFA would not just be politically embarrassing, it would be commercially catastrophic. FIFA's $13 billion revenue machine is built on European participation, European broadcast deals, European sponsors, European audiences. Remove Europe from the World Cup and the $20 billion valuation of the FFE collapses overnight. UEFA knows this, Infantino knows this, and that is why UEFA's boycott threat is the most powerful weapon in world football. FIFA abandoned the biennial World Cup proposal in 2021 when UEFA threatened to walk. They may have to abandon this one too. Here is where things stand right now. As of today, the 30th of July 2026, UEFA has voted unanimously to boycott all FIFA competitions. CONCACAF has raised concerns. The first test comes in September when Poland hosts the Women's Under-20 World Cup. UEFA members will not participate unless the FFE plan is abandoned. Infantino has a presidential election in March 2027 in Rabat, a plan that has turned 3 confederations against him and brought the threat of a World Cup without Europe may have shattered what looked like a clear path to a 4th term. The deadline for member associations to vote on the FFE plan is the 19th of September 2026. Between now and then, the most important negotiation in the history of world football will take place. And here is the final stat that puts all of it in context. FIFA made $15 billion from a World Cup that included European nations. A World Cup without UEFA members, without England, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal would be worth a fraction of that. The $20 billion valuation of the FIFA Forward Enterprise is built entirely on European participation. Infantino is trying to sell something that only has value. because of the people threatening to walk away from it. This is the biggest story in football right now, and at Pitch Deck Report, we will keep covering it. Subscribe. New video every week. The business behind the beautiful game.